Nikki, what do you say we go ahead and get started?
Yeah, let's do it. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for attending today. We appreciate your time. We understand it is valuable, so thanks for spending it with us at least the next 45 minutes or so. Today's webinar is titled Base Plus Option Contract Financing, Creating Bigger and Better Deals Now. My name's Nicole Newell. I'm the Director of Finance, Sales, and Operations here at 4Inc. And presenting today with me is going to be Tony Egan, who is on the line. You may recognize Tony. She was previously with Key Bank. And when Key got out of this market a couple of months back, we were able to convince Tony to come and join our team and help us expand our footprint as we are doing a tremendous amount of financing in federal. Also on the line is Chris Harvey. Chris Harvey is our CRO. He's been with the company for what, Chris? I always exaggerate. 12 years, 14 years, a long time. And has been doing finance deals in this space, I would argue 20, 25 plus years. So between the three of us, you have a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, a lot of opportunity to think about how to tap into us and potentially help you with financing deals. We also do have an extended team behind us that helps us to support and get deals done. And we know a lot about deal structure, about procurement, overcoming objectives. And so we're here to be a resource for you, one that you can tap into, reach out to at any time and talk through. And while we'd love to share everything that we know about financing, we do have limited time today. And so again, we'll go over some things in the next 45 minutes. And our hope is whether you're an inside salesperson or the most experienced federal sales rep on the phone, we hope that you can get a nugget of information out of this presentation today. Maybe think about something, reach out to us, potentially talk to us about an opportunity or just a thought that you're having about a potential opportunity. Leverage us, reach out to us. We're happy to talk deals. We live, eat, and breathe them every day. And also thinking about financing as a sales tool. It's really what it is. It's thinking creatively and strategically about your opportunities and opening up, potential to close bigger deals. Before I turn this over to Chris, I did want to quickly mention that we do have a chat box. Everyone is muted except for us, the presenters. So if you do have a question, please throw it into the chat and we're going to take a couple of breaks throughout the presentation and be able to address those. If we don't get to all of them, we're also going to leave you with our contact information. And so hopefully you'll reach out to us and want to talk more. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris here.
Thanks, Nikki. And I echo what Nikki mentioned. Thank you, everybody, for joining and taking your precious time to join us here for our 45-minute webinar. Even though you're going to see boutique aggregation a couple times here in our slides, it's important to note that 4Inc. was born as a government-focused IT finance company back in 2006. And the mission from day one was to build a government leasing solution when back then federal leasing was considered an overly complicated, unpredictable, and rigid set of processes. And today we think we've turned that upside down to make it a simple, predictable, and flexible process. And so our tagline, you may note, is "We get it done." That wasn't just something we dreamed up in the boardroom, which at the time was our owners, Jeff and Greta's basement, but as words that came from our partners' lips, the OEMs and our government customers even said, "Wow, you guys just get it done." And conveniently, it is also IT, so it makes for a pretty snazzy tagline. And wow, did we ever get it done? We achieved the top A status from 2016 to 18, right before our graduation out of the program. We found ourselves in the Washington Tech top 100 federal contractors list at number 72. And we just recently announced that we've eclipsed the $4.5 billion milestone in finance transactions. So we've been on quite a journey since those basement days. Next slide. But enough of the past. Let's get into the now. And about 2 years ago, 4Inc did make a strategic decision to pivot into what we're calling boutique aggregation, aka federal distributor, aka a master solution provider. But one thing is always and has been, always will be the same, is that our mission is to help OEMs and our partners do better business with the government. But not to fear, our commitment to supporting multi-year deals has never been stronger, as you'll learn here shortly. Now, without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Tony Egan, our VP of Financing, to jump right into the meat and potatoes of our webinar.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks everybody for jumping on. Before we get into the details about base plus option year contracts, I think it's important to understand the environment that we're in today, specifically as it relates to opportunity, right? So all of us who work in the federal market appreciate what a unique customer we have, right? But what may not fully be realized is the enormous potential that this market holds for us. So to put that into perspective, the federal government spends over $200 billion in IT products and services every year, right? And of that 200 billion, about 2 billion or so is procured through some sort of payment plan or base plus option year contract. So if you compare that to the commercial or the SLED markets who've actually embraced the idea of financing, those markets have lease penetration numbers of about 30 to 40%, right? So in federal government speak, that's about $70 billion. So why isn't the federal government leveraging financing the way that other markets are? And I think the reason is twofold. First, they don't know to ask for the solution necessarily. And secondly, and probably more often, is they don't think they can do it, right? How many times you've heard objections from your customers that, oh, we can't do anything beyond the current fiscal year. So typically what IT leaders and KOs are looking at is they're taking a look at their budgets and they're trying to squeeze out all the capital dollars they can to obtain what they need, but that need and those numbers don't add up. And when you add to that trends that we're seeing in the federal government, which include, shift in procurement strategy from Band-Aid fixes to more of these campus-wide approaches. And they're doing this because they want to get smarter about how they're procuring and using economies of scale and efficiencies, but bigger projects mean more dollars that are needed, right? So add that to they're scrambling to meet mandates to modernize outdated equipment and increase security postures. So all of those things come together, but the budget problem is still there, and it's only getting harder as governmental priorities shift. So as big as that $200 billion number is, it's still not enough. And agencies are being absolutely forced to consider alternatives to that traditional capital procurement method. And this is where our opportunity really lies. This is where the base plus option year comes into play. Nikki, if you could move to that next slide. So the way that we suggest that we help solve this problem is by introducing your customer to multi-year payment options or base plus option year contracts. And from the government's perspective, these are not financed or leased opportunities. What they are is simply a contract structure that allows the agency to far compliantly spread that payment obligation over multiple fiscal years. So your agency would have the intent, but not the obligation to renew the contract. So it's not violating any anti-deficiency rules, or it fits very well with FAR compliancy. So all the financing that's done is done outside of the government contract between FOR and our partners. And these structures provide you with the capability to benefit your customer while closing larger, more profitable transactions, because you're essentially getting paid up front and shifting renewal risk over to FOR. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. But where do these base plus option year contracts make sense? And there's a wide variety of situations where it can apply, right? So if there's a budget shortfall, I think that's probably the most prevalent, is they simply just don't have enough of the funds in the base year to get everything that they need now. Or maybe they need to consolidate multiple contracts that all have different pop dates and they're difficult to manage. They could also be approaching deadlines for mandates where they're required to modernize their technology and their solutions. And we're also seeing a lot of requests or interest around this concept of as a service. And we could do and probably will do a whole nother presentation on as a service because Ford does have that capability. But generally, in those circumstances, the government either has a certain color of money issue or they just want to outsource their technology management so they don't own the equipment, they don't have to operate it, they don't have to maintain it, and they can stay on top of the best in the current technology. So your customer may have one of these elements or maybe a combination of all of them. But whatever their specific circumstance is, Ford can help you structure a contract that helps them through those challenges. And you can change the conversation from how much do you have, contact to the IT folks who are looking at the solutions to what do you need and how do we get you what you need, and we'll help you figure out how to pay for that. So you actually, by changing that conversation, become that trusted advisor to provide not only the best technology, but help solve their budgetary issues as well. So let's take a look at what some of those structures look like.
Yeah, and to Tony's point there, often, some sales folks will say to us, well, my customer doesn't finance. My customer doesn't do this. And I would argue you're probably right. And 9 times out of 10, I mean, sometimes, with these big equipment, heavy lifts or hardware components or something along those lines, you get customers potentially asking for a finance solution because they know they don't have the budget and they'll structure it accordingly. But in the world that we live in, which is really around software or more heavily software these days than ever, it doesn't look like financing, right? Because they're signing up or they're purchasing subscription software licenses. And so how do you structure that? And how do you turn that conversation to benefit the customer, benefit yourself? And that's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at 2 scenarios here and kind of walk through a deal structure in a software subscription license, as well as if you were to buy or be selling a heavy hardware forklift opportunity, right? Where they have to make a big investment up front, or maybe it's perpetual license. There are still people out there selling that versus say the subscription model. So let me dive into that a little bit here. So this is a standard subscription deal, right? Let's say that your business's usual price in year 1, and this is if you're selling something 1 year at a time. The way traditionally it is done is you've got your price, and then next year there's going to be a 10% incremental uplift just for, cost of goods and inflation and what have you. And then there's going to be another 10% uplift. And so this is really showing like the simplest, right, way that we would look at an opportunity. But if you look at a flexible payment option, and that really is setting up a base plus options contract structure. If you get into a base plus options on the back end, the partner, the registered partner, or 4Inc in there helping, is funding 3 years up front. So technically there is no need for that 10% uplift. And so you can show the customer a cost savings by presenting that 1.1 in this scenario. Instead of the incremental uplift, it's 1.1 each year, leaving it predictable for them in terms of what their costs are going to be for the next several years, saving them money, right? And sharing that. So in this scenario, you've got a cost savings to the customer of $350,000. And there's a much larger order coming up front on the back end. And that be it that the partner is going to buy 3, 4, or in some instances, 5 years up front. And what does that mean to us as salespeople? Well, I know I'd rather have a $3 million deal versus a $1.1 million deal. And I think that's, salespeople that are crushing their numbers in this environment with federal, they're doing it by leveraging financing. And so again, just sharing some light scenarios with you. If you have questions about this, we're going to pause in a couple minutes and allow you to potentially ask some questions through the chat. Let's move along to the second opportunity, which is looking at equipment financing. Chris?
Yeah, thanks, Nikki. So for the individuals on the call that sell equipment like storage, firewalls, networking gear, and even perpetual software licenses, where you find yourself having a larger upfront purchase, typically a capital purchase, and having a maintenance tail that goes out in time, maybe 2, 3, 4 years. This is the scenario we often see, and we'll walk you through what we think is a better method. And so, Nikki, if you could go to the next slide. So, and I'm sure no one on this call has ever done this, but this is just an example of what we've seen sometimes from some of the folks that we work with. If you have a requirement, let's say there's a $3 million GSA price to it, and the out years are $600K of maintenance, which is your typical 20% maintenance payments. When the government tells you that they don't have the budget for $3 million, the next move is typically to apply a discount to this $3 million. And so what then happens is you've reduced your revenue on the front end to 2.4 to accommodate a budget shortfall. And the government then comes back and says, this is great, but I don't have 2.4 million. And so typically what we see is the reps go back to management and say, look, this is an opportunity to get a new product in there. This is an opportunity to get our foot in the door. We got to discount some more, and we got to get this deal done. And so what typically happens is you go back to management and get another discount, and you lower your revenue even further. So in this case, we're down to a 33% discount. And so it's very plausible that even you go down to this $2 million and the government says, I don't have $2 million. I only have $1.4 million. And so we think there's a better way to not discount your deal down to $1.4 million because it just didn't help. What we think is a better process is to spread those payments out over 3 years. So I always say too, if you can get $3 million, take it, right? That's the obvious approach here. You lay the $3 million down in front of a customer, and if you can get it, you take it. But what we've seen is this aggressive discounting. So in this scenario, you could charge the government 1.4 annually, and you're going to match their initial budget constraint of 1.4 million, but your outcome is going to be much closer to the original 3,600,600 that you originally started with versus a $1.5 million or $1.4 million deal. And so here's the visualization of that deal. And I like to call this deal staging, where you show the manufacturer list price, you show the government sale price. And again, if you can get the 3 million, you take it, right? But this is a scenario where the government only has $1.4 million of budget. And when you hear that, the thought needs to be, okay, how do I take a $1.4 million budget and keep the same discounting integrity that I had at the beginning of this conversation? And you can do that by spreading those payments out on top of the maintenance payments over the 3-year period. And as a result, in this example, you'll sell it to the customer for 4.2, and you'll have a net result of a PO for 3.8. And so part of the magic here is, again, the deal staging, showing them list price, showing them what it looks like to pay for it all up front, and then the benefit of having a multi-year payment plan that even gives them a equal payment each year. And so by spreading out the payments, you really do enter yourself into a new conversation with the customer. It's not what they can't do, it's what do you have? Because we can work with that. And it really allows you to have a different conversation with your customer base.
And Chris, to that point, it's having this in your back pocket. Like Chris said, if you can get that 3 million up front, awesome. But if not, be ready to talk and pivot to this payment structure, this payment plan, allowing greater flexibility for your customers. And how do you do that, right? When you're quoting, what does that look like? I've seen too often just a little bit of a fumble in the sales cycle where the customer asks for a budgetary quote and the rep provides that 1 year and maybe it's, you know, all of it up front, or they try to put in front of them a 3-year SKU or something along those lines, when we know the customer can't obligate, right? So having that base plus option structure, and I'm going to show you what that looks like here and how it gets quoted, right? When they ask for that budgetary quote, that's the moment. That's like the moment that you want to be thinking about potentially leveraging financing on the back end. And how do you need to structure that from the onset early? If you send them the 1-year quote, right, with just 1 year of subscriptions, or the 1 year of the equipment up front, and they don't have that budget, or they do, right? That quote is what gets submitted in for the requisition, for the purchase and the procurement. And if you're thinking about financing later, going, whoa, I can make a much bigger deal for myself, especially, right, if I'm selling these software subscriptions, I want to put in front of them a base plus options. You might have missed that window. I've seen it where we you know, reps will try to get the customers to get back on board with the base plus options concept, but it's a little bit like the ship is sailing. And so you want to do that early when you're quoting options. It's great to show a 1-year option, but give them that 3, 4, or 5-year option as well. That's where you can create incentive. You can show discounting and savings and all that great stuff. So there's something in it for the customer, right? There has to be. But then there also is something in it for you in terms of selling and being able to supersize your deals, bring in bigger deals, hit your quotas, and achieve, you know, certain margins that we all like to get as salespeople. And this is what it would look like if you're doing that base plus option. This is very simple, 2-CLIN structure, but instead of separately pricing everything out, bundle it, and then create the payment schedule at the bottom. Base, option year 1, option year 2, and showing them that payment structure. I'm going to pause there for a second. Like I said, we would. Do we have any questions in the chat?
There are no questions in the chat at this time.
Okay. One thing I might bring up is often we get asked, what's your minimum deal size or your maximum deal size? And to that, I would say usually we are, number one, we want to make sure the products are essential, right? Vetting the products is very important. But if we are strictly looking at the numbers, anything that's in that 100K range per year plus is something that can get financed. And then on the opposite extreme, no deal's too big. I mean, we finance deals that are 200 million, 300 million. And so that's kind of maybe to answer that question or put some of that a little bit in perspective in terms of deal sizes. So going back to the quote, often we get asked about terms and conditions. And terms and conditions of the past, they used to be cumbersome. If some of you on the line have done financing for many, many years, you know what I'm talking about. But ultimately, in the new world of financing and where we live, financing is really, again, it's more taking place on the back end the majority of the time. And so the quote looks like what we just shared with you, right? And then right below this payment schedule is this set of terms and conditions. This isn't the end all be all. This isn't the terms that get used in every single deal. Sometimes we have to vet, look at an RFQ. If it's in heavy equipment purchase, there might be an additional sentence that we need to add in there. But in a nutshell, we basically are telling the customer that it's a bundled offer, right? We don't want to see them partially terminate. They reserve their right to terminate in full. The only gotcha in this set of terms and conditions, and some of you may be familiar with this, is non-substitution clause. And that is about a halfway down where it says, should the government choose not to renew a particular option or terminate the contract, right? They have to reserve their right to be able to do that. Now, I would argue 50% of the time, we actually get this in with customers, in with CEOs, and it goes through procurement, and we're in a great position. The other 50% of the time, it becomes a negotiation. And that's where the experience that we have working with the partners, working with you on the OEM side, we can talk to the value of the deal, the discount that's being extended, and negotiate from these terms. That's the point here, is that we can be flexible with these when we feel good about the story, the essential use, maybe the discount that's getting extended. We launch off with these terms, but we don't always land with these terms. So we can be flexible. I wanted to share this because I feel like it's a big, you know, it's treated like a big secret on the back end, but it's really not that complicated. I'm going to hand it over to Tony here to talk about some data points that we look at.
Sure. So the next question is obviously where do we get started, right? And what are the things that we should be thinking about in order to ensure that the deals are moving smoothly through the process? And the first one is identifying the parties involved, right? Like who's in the PO chain? Do we have all the relevant agreements in place with them? Do we need to leverage any of the contracts that FOR holds in any particular situation? Are all the key stakeholders involved in the conversation? Are there champions? I know all those early identification of the key people helps the process along to make sure that when our decisions are getting made, everybody has buy-in into the project. The second and very important element is the essential use story. Like this is, obviously the most important piece to us, but it also is where our expertise comes in to help you to structure things and put forth the best offer. So this is the part of the process where we're collecting all of the information and helping us determine what's the appropriate structure based on the agency's need and their preferences. So we provide a questionnaire that we ask to get filled out that helps along with that process. But this is an important piece that to what we've been saying all along, the earlier we're involved, the better. And along with that sort of getting in early is we want to make sure that we're getting the pricing piece down before the government is shown anything, right? So what we're trying to avoid is a situation where a price expectation is set, but all of everybody's fees and margins and finance costs haven't been added in, right? So we want to make sure that any price that gets presented includes all the elements so that we can avoid further discounting or any kind of negative impact into margins later on in the process. The other piece that is important to us is taking a look at the bill of materials, right? To see what is the technology and the solution that's being offered and what's included with that. Hardware, software, maintenance, what are we bundling in? And all of this is critical to providing all of the best pricing, and again, goes along with making sure that we're structuring this so that all the parties win. And along with that goes the discounting that Nicole was speaking to is what's the value proposition that we're building into the opportunity. And one of the most important elements is really important to understand it as early in the process as we can, is to understand those agency specific constraints, right? Like what is their budget now and what do they expect to have in the future? This is, what's the desired term and the technology, and making sure that all of those things aligned. So these are all things that we should be working together to build out customized solutions for your customer with the best outcome for everybody. You can go to the next slide, Nicole.
And so why FOR Inc? Why would you work with us, say, versus some competition out there? And I said a lot of this earlier on, which was just the breadth and depth of knowledge that you have with the folks on our side. Not just Tony, Chris, and myself, although we have a lot of experience, the team behind us as well, that's been doing this for 20, 30 plus years. We do have a lot of knowledge. We do hold contracts, and I don't want this to seem threatening to anybody that's on the phone if you're on the resale VAR side, because we're here to help complement. Sometimes we work with some larger partners and they're looking for a small business partner that might want to, need a prime on, say, a soup small business, or maybe it's iTest software too, or something along those lines. We hold vehicles to help facilitate these types of transactions. And as a result of that, we do get to see a lot of what happens with regard to deal structure and how things move through procurement. And so we understand how to navigate those hurdles or potential hurdles and get to the kind of the right outcome that we're looking for, which is you're calling a deal. We want you to be able to have confidence in that deal. And in some instances, this could be the deal of your career, or it could be the deal of your year, or maybe your quarter. We want you to have confidence in working with FOR Inc. that we know what we're doing. We know the right levers to pull. We know how to help navigate. And so that's, competitive rates, we're always going to be there. Everything's based upon treasury. And our hope is that if we send some numbers to you, we send a finance model based upon a customer price or maybe a cost plus, If the numbers, you're not understanding them, come back to us. Let's have a conversation. Let's look at it and try to understand too. If you're not familiar in positioning these deals, you know, again, leveraging the knowledge, ask us if we've worked with a specific type of customer. Ask us about how we've structured maybe as a service type consumption-based models. All of this we're willing to share with you. This is a partnership. We want to make sure that we're creating good opportunity and good business together and helping you achieve your numbers, helping you blow your sales quotas out. I mean, that is the goal. That's what we're here to try to help you with. So if we can do so leveraging our contracts, that's great. If you hold your own contracts, that's perfectly fine. We just sit outside the order flow and we can fund these opportunities. But it does have to be a collaboration between all of us. Channel partner, OEM, 4Inc, making sure that we're all singing off of the same sheet of music. And that's, again, to get to you the right outcome of getting the deal done and getting it done successfully. These aren't extremely hard, but if you're new to it, you know, there's a couple dance moves and we're here to help you kind of navigate that. Moving on to the next slide here. Tony, you want to share some final thoughts?
Yeah, so again, I think if you take a single point away from today, it's early involvement, right? But on top of that, we also have a challenge for you all, is we suggest thinking differently, right? Like break out of that traditional procurement, 1 year at a time mentality that a lot of our customers are stuck in right now. And what we suggest is that you take a look at your existing pipelines and or even existing customer bases and get creative, right? So do any of those opportunities that you're looking at have any of the elements that we've talked about earlier, right? What's the agency scope and has it fit with the mission compared against their budget, right? And how are they consuming licenses? Is there a better way for them to do that? Can savings be achieved through multi-year purchases or multi-year structures? Do they have a lot of different contracts that would be more easily managed if it fell under one umbrella contract? And have they recently had budget diversions, right? Have they been caught in any kind of shortfall? And if you can look at your existing pipeline and identify any one or more of those elements, then that's an opportunity for you to present something without even being asked as a solution, right? And again, bring us in early to help you craft that. And we'll be there from the beginning to the end to work on structures, to help with any questions. We'll be as visible to your customers as you need us. So if you want to bring us on a call to help explain this, then we're happy to do that. But it starts with you and it starts with identifying those opportunities. And then, you know, we can maybe have some brainstorming or tire kicking sessions where do any of those potential opportunities fit the base plus option model, and we can help you put those together and offer them.
Awesome. Chris, any final thoughts from you perhaps?
Yeah, I just would like to open the kimono to, you know, just, it's a phone call, it's a collaboration. You might have some ideas. We have a lot of experience, and together we just may be able to create an opportunity for you to do a bigger deal than you would have otherwise. So, you know, a call's free, and if it doesn't work out on this one, you know, we catch you on the next one. So I just encourage, I like Tony's, you know, pro tip of, you know, be creative. Let us help you be creative and leverage our experience. And let's just do bigger deals together. One last thing, we'll be at TechNet Cyber in Baltimore in a couple of weeks. So if you guys are there, we'll be the team in the green outfits and the green banners, and look forward to hopefully collaborating there. Otherwise, thank you guys so much for joining today. We really do appreciate it.
And we'll be following up with an email, just a quick thank you. We'll also include a link to our contact information, and there's going to be a short survey that's going to be included. If you wouldn't mind answering those few questions, it would be very helpful to us. I did see something pop up in chat. Is there anything there, Lena, before I let everyone go and have their afternoon?
Nope, no questions.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. We appreciate your time. Thanks for joining, and look forward to hearing from you.
Have a great day, everyone.